Evan Mercer had learned the hard way that diplomacy was not about words. It was about the spaces between words, the pauses that could be mistaken for insult, and the eye contact that meant one thing on Earth and something legally binding everywhere else. Halcyon Spire Station did not help. The grand atrium was a cathedral built for politics, all glass and drifting lanterns, with a view of a planet's night side glowing beneath them like circuitry. Translation fields overlapped in the air, turning a dozen languages into a steady hum that pressed faintly against Evan's ears. He stood where an Earth cultural liaison was supposed to stand, near the edge of the room, holding a drink he did not trust, smiling in a way that suggested friendly mammal rather than ambitious primate. The beverage assigned to broad compatibility was pale blue and tasted like someone had tried to invent fruit punch from memory. Evan took a sip anyway. It was either that or mingle, and mingling was how wars started. Across the dance floor, a pair of delegates moved through a slow pattern that might have been a waltz or might have been the signing of a tariff agreement. A security officer watched them with the weary expression of someone who had spent her life preventing catastrophes caused by compliments. Evan was considering whether he could leave without anyone noticing when he saw her. She stood near the observation windows, framed by stars. The crowd around her formed an instinctive distance, not the polite space reserved for dignitaries, but the cautious emptiness reserved for storms. She was still unhurried, as if time moved differently in her orbit. Her skin was a cool, luminous gray, her black hair braided in long ropes, and a gold circlet traced her brow with a dark gemstone at its center. Her ears tapered into elegant points, and her eyes were a bright amber that seemed to hold light instead of reflecting it. But it was her expression that pulled him in, not boredom, not arrogance. Loneliness disciplined into something that could pass for composure. Evan's training offered the correct response. Do not approach. Request an introduction through channels. Review the species briefing you definitely read. His feet betrayed him. He crossed the atrium, passing clusters of officials who spoke in quiet, careful tones. Conversations thinned as he moved, and not because he was important, because he was doing something they did not want to be associated with. The air around her shimmered. Her translation field looked denser than the others, like the station needed extra effort to make her understandable. She turned before he reached her. Up close, her gaze landed on him with the precision of a blade being tested against skin. Evan felt, very clearly, that he was about to make a mistake. He also felt just as clearly that he was tired of spending his life afraid of mistakes. He offered a real smile and said, "Would you like to dance?" For a heartbeat, she did not answer. Evan's mind produced a rapid list of disasters. He had just invited a stranger into a ritual in a room built on protocol. He might have proposed, he might have challenged, he might have volunteered for something his grandchildren would still be paying for. Then her face softened. Surprise, and then something warmer that did not look practiced. "Yes," she said. Her voice was low and smooth, like honey warmed in a metal cup. "I would." She placed her hand in his. Her skin was cool, not unpleasant. The contact felt ordinary. The room's reaction did not. A server stopped mid-step. Two delegates shifted away too quickly. Near the entrance, Evan caught sight of his colleague Mara Nguyen, eyes wide, lips forming a silent, horrified warning. Evan pretended he had not noticed. He led his partner toward the dance floor as if this were normal, as if people stepped out of his path because they respected Earth, not because they feared what he had touched. The station's music adjusted, producing something mathematically pleasant and emotionally safe. Evan found a familiar frame and began to move. To his relief, she matched him instantly, precise and effortless, making him look better than he deserved. "I should warn you," Evan said quietly. "I am competent at exactly 3 dances. The rest are mostly apologizing with my feet." A soft laugh, musical crystalline, wrong in a way that made it memorable. "Then I will protect my feet." Generous. They settled into a slow turn. The circle of empty space around them grew as other dancers drifted back. Evan tried not to look at it. He tried not to think about why. "What is your name?" she asked. "Evan Mercer," he said. "Earth's liaison, professional attendee of uncomfortable parties." Her eyes held his. "You speak as if you dislike your work." "I like peace," Evan said. "I just dislike the parts of peace that require forks with instructions." The corners of her mouth lifted, and for a second she looked less like a statue and more like someone who remembered how to be amused. "And you?" Evan asked. "I feel like I should know." A pause, small but deliberate. "Seralith," she said. The translator collar hesitated before rendering it, as if the name carried weight the device did not want to mishandle. "Seralith," Evan repeated. "That is beautiful." "Most people say it carefully," she replied, still smiling, as if it could cut them. Evan's heart gave one unhelpful thump. "I am very bad at careful." "I noticed," Seralith said. Over her shoulder, Mara started toward them with the urgency of someone trying to stop a shuttle from docking in the wrong bay. Evan kept his posture steady, his smile intact, and his hand lightly against Seralith's. If this was a mistake, it was already happening, and for the first time all night it felt honest. Evan had the uneasy sensation that the station was holding its breath. The music remained smooth and diplomatic, but everything around it had tightened. Conversations thinned into murmurs. The edges of the dance floor cleared as if an invisible perimeter had been drawn, and no one wanted to test it. Seralith moved with the calm precision of someone who had never been surprised by gravity. Evan, by comparison, moved like a man negotiating with gravity and losing in small, humiliating increments. She compensated so gracefully that he almost looked intentional. "You're very good at this," he said, careful to keep his voice light. "I have had time," she replied. It was a simple sentence, but it landed with a faint chill, not threatening. Just ancient, in the way a mountain could be ancient without ever needing to brag. Evan tried to ignore the widening ring of space around them. He tried to ignore the way a Jupiter delegation couple backed away, as if proximity might become contagious. He tried to ignore the fact that a server carrying a tray of shimmering glasses had stopped, stared, and then turned around without delivering anything. If this was what celebrity felt like, he did not recommend it. So Evan said, "Is Halcyon Spire your usual scene, or did you also lose a bet?" Seralith's eyes held his, amber and bright. "I do not gamble." "That sounds like something a person who always wins would say." A small smile touched her mouth. "Perhaps." They turned. Her hand was still cool against his. Again, not unpleasant. More like polished stone kept in shade. Evan could feel his pulse in his fingertips and hated how easily she seemed to notice it. "You asked me," she said, without hesitation. Evan blinked. "I did." "Why?" He almost lied. The trained answer was easy: cultural outreach, goodwill, cross-species rapport, a harmless interaction to soften the room. But she was watching him as if she could hear the difference between the truth and the version designed for reports. "Because you looked like you wanted someone to," he said, and nobody had. For a beat her expression went still, not cold, just sealed like a door that had learned to close on its own. Then she exhaled and something softened again. "That is rare," she said quietly. Evan swallowed. "Loneliness is common. People just dress it better out here." Seralith's gaze shifted past his shoulder toward the crowd. The emptiness around them had become dramatic enough to be absurd. A dozen eyes tracked them openly now. "It does not bother you," she asked, "being watched?" Evan rotated them into a turn, narrowly avoiding stepping on her foot. "I am an Earth liaison. If I am not being watched, someone has forgotten to file paperwork." Her laugh came again, that crystalline sound that made the translator field around them shimmer, as if it had to work harder to keep up. Nearby, a pair of dignitaries stopped speaking mid-sentence. One of them stared at Evan's hand on Seralith's waist like it was a weapon. The music shifted into something slightly faster, a rhythm that encouraged motion and discouraged thought. Seralith adapted instantly. Evan did what he always did in diplomatic crises. He pretended he knew what he was doing and prayed nobody noticed the difference. He caught a glimpse of Mara Nguyen cutting through the crowd with determined urgency. Her face had gone beyond concern into a new category Evan had not seen before. It was the expression of someone watching a colleague lean into an airlock and say, "I wonder what this button does." Mara reached the edge of the dance floor and stopped, because the space around Evan and Saralith had become a visible boundary. She raised 2 fingers in the emergency signal they had invented after Evan's first month on the job. "Stop. Now, before it gets worse." Evan gave her a small shrug that meant, "I would love to, but I am currently trapped inside my own choices." Saralith noticed. "Your companion is distressed." "Mara is always distressed," Evan said. "It's her brand." "That is not true," Saralith replied, still smiling. "This is different." Evan's mouth went dry. He did not ask how she knew. He did not want the answer. They completed the dance. The final notes faded with a polite flourish, and the room's collective tension did not release. If anything, it tightened further. Saralith withdrew her hand with slow grace. "Thank you," she said, as if he had done her a favor instead of causing a minor diplomatic seizure. Evan's feet ached. His shirt collar felt too tight, and he was suddenly aware that he had been holding his breath. "Thank you for not injuring me," he said, "or laughing when I nearly did." "I laughed," she said, "just quietly." He grinned despite himself, merciful. They stepped toward the refreshment tables. The crowd moved around them like water around a rock, refusing to touch. Evan reached for a pale blue drink out of habit. Saralith's gaze flicked to the glass, then to him. "Is it safe?" "Safe is a strong word," Evan said. "It is designed to offend the fewest beings possible. It tastes like compromise." "That sounds dreadful." "It is," Evan said. "But it keeps me from accidentally consuming something that dissolves human organs, most of the time." Saralith accepted the glass anyway. Her fingers brushed his. 2 nearby officials actually flinched. One of them dropped his own drink, and the glass shattered softly on the floor, luminescent liquid spreading like spilled starlight. Mara appeared at Evan's elbow with surgical speed. "Evan," she said, through teeth that barely moved, "I need you, now." "Hi, Mara," Evan replied. "I am in the middle of a beverage lecture." Mara did not blink. Her eyes were fixed on Saralith with the focus of someone looking at a loaded device. "Move." Evan started to protest, then saw the color of Mara's knuckles as she gripped his sleeve. He let himself be pulled behind a decorative column draped in floating fabric that shifted with the station's airflow. The moment they were out of immediate view, Mara's composure cracked. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "I danced," Evan said, "with a woman who wanted to dance." Mara's stare was ferocious. "You do not dance with her. You do not touch her. You do not offer her neutral beverages like she is a lonely guest at an Earth fundraiser." Evan frowned. "Mara, you are making this sound dramatic." "It is dramatic," Mara said. "It is the kind of dramatic that turns into treaties or funerals." Evan's pulse thudded in his ears. "Who is she?" Mara took a breath, as if the answer itself was dangerous to speak aloud. "That is Saralith of the Noctari courts," she said. "The sovereign they call the Night Regent." Evan stared at her. Night Regent. That sounds like a title, designed to make people step back. "That is exactly what it does," Mara said. "People do not approach her, not casually, not without permission, not without a team that knows the protocol down to the angle of your bow." Evan glanced past the column. Saralith stood at the refreshment table, perfectly composed, sipping the pale blue drink like it was not disappointing at all. 2 figures had appeared beside her, dressed in dark formal attire that looked less like clothing and more like armor pretending to be elegant. They spoke to her in low, urgent tones. She listened without changing expression. Then, as if she felt Evan looking, Saralith turned her head. Her eyes met his across the distance, and in that single glance, Evan understood something he had not fully admitted until now. She had known exactly who she was the moment he asked, and she had said yes anyway, Mara's voice dropped to a whisper. "Evan, whatever you think this is, it is bigger. The room is recording every second. The other delegations will interpret this as a statement." "A statement," Evan repeated, still locked on Seralith's gaze. "Yes," Mara said, "and she does not make statements by accident." Seralith's mouth curved into the faintest smile, as if she found his dawning alarm amusing. Evan exhaled slowly. Then he straightened his jacket. Mara grabbed his arm. "Evan, no." He looked at her and surprised himself with the steadiness in his voice. "She said yes," he replied. "Not because I was brave, because I was honest. If everyone treats her like a hazard, maybe the rare thing is treating her like a person." Mara's face tightened. "That is either the most human thing you have ever said or the last." Evan offered her a small, tired smile. "I will try to make it the first." He stepped out from behind the column and started back toward the refreshment table, toward the woman with amber eyes and a crown that did not need anyone's permission to exist. Behind him, Mara whispered something into her comms that sounded like a prayer and a warning at the same time. The crowd parted as Evan crossed the atrium, not with the smooth politeness of trained diplomats, but with the instinctive recoil of people making room for a blade they were not sure was sheathed. He kept his pace even. He kept his shoulders loose. He kept his face in the pleasant, harmless expression Earth officials practiced in mirrors. Inside, his mind replayed Mara's words on a loop. Night Regent, not approached casually, not touched. He stopped a respectful distance from Seralith, because that was what the room expected. Then he ignored the room. He stepped close enough that he could speak without the translators turning his words into a broadcast. "I owe you an apology," he said. Seralith looked up from her pale blue drink. Two attendants in dark formal stood slightly behind her, positioned like shadows that had learned to stand upright. One was tall, angular, his expression composed into something colder than discipline. The other was a woman with silver-white hair braided tight, her gaze calmer but no less sharp. Seralith's amber eyes flicked over Evan's face as if reading what he had learned. "For what?" she asked. "For being ignorant," Evan said, "and for not realizing the implications of what I did." The tall attendant's jaw tightened. A small movement, but in the quiet space around them it might as well have been a drawn weapon. Seralith did not look at him. She did not need to. "And yet," she said, "your ignorance was the only thing that made your invitation sincere." Evan felt heat rise in his neck. "So you did know." "I knew," Seralith confirmed. The silver-haired attendant leaned in just enough to be heard by her alone, but Evan still caught a few words through the overlapping translation hum. "Concern. Protocol exposure." Seralith listened without changing expression. Then she set her glass down with care and looked back to Evan. "You came back," she said. "I did," Evan replied. "Apparently that's either courageous or suicidal. I'm still deciding." Her mouth curved slightly. "It can be both." Evan exhaled and let himself look at the attendants. "I'm sorry if I caused trouble." The tall one spoke first, voice clipped and formal. "Trouble is a mild word. You have created a spectacle." Evan's instincts flared. Apologize, de-escalate, say the right thing, say nothing. Seralith's gaze stayed on Evan, not her attendant. "Lord Vaylor," she said softly, "do not mistake novelty for disrespect." The tall attendant froze as if the air itself had thickened around him. He lowered his head by a fraction. "As you will, Regent," he said. Evan swallowed. He had spent 18 months watching humans in authority command rooms. This was different. Seralith did not raise her voice. She did not posture. She simply existed with certainty, and the world adjusted around that certainty. The silver-haired attendant spoke next, more measured. "The other delegations are already interpreting. This will not remain a private matter." "I know," Seralith replied. She lifted her hand slightly toward Evan, palm open. Not a command, an invitation. Evan took it. Her fingers were cool. The reaction around them was immediate. A ripple of murmurs. A sharp inhale from someone too close. A sudden, frantic motion as a junior aide backed away and collided with a server tray. Glasses clinked. Something luminous spilled. The scent that rose was not fruit, not alcohol, but sharp and metallic, like ozone after a storm. Saralith's eyes narrowed. Evan's training finally caught up to him. He recognized the smell from a briefing he had half listened to while thinking about lunch. Reactive compound. Inhalation hazard. Used by certain species for ritual intimidation. Not typically served in public. The server looked terrified, not of Saralith, of what he had just done. "Do not breathe," Mara's voice cut in, sudden at Evan's shoulder. Evan glanced sideways. Mara had returned, her expression set into controlled focus. She had a small field projector in one hand, already activating. A faint shimmer spread between them and the spill, catching particles in the air. The server's lips trembled. I didn't mean." "Step back," Mara ordered. Her tone made it sound like a kindness. The crowd shifted further away. The ring of space around Saralith expanded until it was no longer subtle. It was a statement. Saralith watched the spill with calm disdain, like someone looking at a cheap trick they had seen 100 times. Then she turned her gaze to the server. He flinched as if struck. Evan felt the urge to step between them, which was absurd. Saralith was not moving. She was not threatening. She was simply looking at him, and the man's body reacted as if it knew something Evan did not. "Who sent you?" Saralith asked. The translator field rendered her words smoothly, but there was an undertone beneath it that made Evan's skin tighten. Not menace. Authority sharpened into a point. The server swallowed hard. His eyes darted toward the edge of the room where several aides stood in a tight knot, pretending not to watch. My regent, I was told." His voice cracked. "I was told your guest would appreciate something traditional." Mara's eyes flicked to Evan. Guest. That word landed like a weight. Evan opened his mouth, ready to deny it, to correct it, to make it smaller. Saralith did not. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying Evan as if weighing a possibility. Then she looked back to the server. "Tradition does not require cruelty," she said. "It requires honesty." The server's breath hitched. His shoulders sagged, as if the fight went out of him at the sound of her disappointment. Saralith released Evan's hand and moved closer to the spill, just enough to place herself between Evan and the air that still shimmered with Mara's containment field. The attendants shifted instantly, bodies angling, hands poised. Not dramatic, efficient. Evan saw it clearly now. Saralith's people were not simply escorts. They were guardians or wardens or both. Saralith did not touch the spill. She did not need to. She simply spoke. "Remove him," she said quietly. Lord Vaylor moved without visible effort. One moment he stood behind her. The next he had the server by the elbow, guiding him away with a grip that looked gentle and felt absolute. The silver-haired attendant leaned toward Saralith. "This will be interpreted as weakness, Regent, if you allow." Saralith's gaze did not waver. "It will be interpreted as control. I chose my response." Her eyes shifted to Mara then, and Mara, who feared nothing in official meetings, visibly steadied herself. "Human," Saralith said. Mara's mouth tightened. "Cultural attaché Nuyen, Regent." "You are competent," Saralith observed. Mara blinked once. "Thank you." Saralith looked back to Evan. The noise of the room had not returned. Everyone was listening, pretending they were. "You are surrounded by people who will try to turn your sincerity into leverage," Saralith said, voice lowered for him alone. "They will attempt to rewrite your invitation into a negotiation." Evan's throat felt dry. "I'm not negotiating." "I know," she said. "That is why it matters." Mara shifted closer barely. "Evan," she murmured, "we need to leave now, before someone decides to force a narrative." Saralith's eyes flicked to Mara and back to Evan. Her expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "I will not let them harm you," she said. Evan stared at her. "That's not a normal sentence to hear at a diplomatic reception." "No," Saralith agreed. "It is not a normal night." She hesitated, just long enough for Evan to feel the room tightening again. Then she reached into the air between them, not touching him, but offering something more dangerous than contact. A choice. "Tomorrow," she said, "you will receive a formal summons." Mara went rigid. "Regent, that is." Seralith's gaze silenced her without hostility. Evan managed to keep his voice steady. "A summons sounds like something you send to enemies. It is also something you send to those you intend to protect," Seralith replied. "You will come to my audience chamber on Halcyon Spire, under my seal, under my rules." Evan's heart beat once, hard. He understood the implication without needing Mara to translate it into panic. Everyone would know. Every delegation would analyze it. And somehow, the strangest part was not the political danger. It was the quiet certainty in Seralith's voice, as if she had already decided that Evan belonged in her orbit for reasons he could not yet see. "What happens if I refuse?" Evan asked. Seralith's smile returned, faint and knowing. "Then tonight becomes a rumor. And if I accept, then tonight becomes a beginning," she said. Mara's hand brushed Evan's sleeve, a warning disguised as support. Evan looked at her, saw the fear she was trying to hide, and then looked back at Seralith. He did not say yes, not yet, but he did not say no either. Seralith seemed to read that hesitation as clearly as spoken words. She inclined her head with formal grace, the kind that belonged to a sovereign and could not be borrowed. "Go," she said quietly, "before the room decides what you are to me." Evan took a step back. The space between them widened, and the crowd exhaled as if a pressure valve had been released. Mara seized the moment, steering him toward the exit with a grip that looked casual and felt like rescue. As they walked, Evan glanced over his shoulder one last time. Seralith stood where he had left her, framed by the stars, her attendants at her sides, her posture calm and absolute. But her eyes stayed on him, and in that gaze, Evan felt a promise settle into place like a lock turning. Tomorrow, the station would call it a summons. He suspected it was something else entirely. Mara did not speak until they were out of the grand atrium and moving through a quieter corridor where the translation fields thinned, and the station's hum became more mechanical, less political. Only then did she exhale, sharp and controlled, like she had been holding her breath for an hour. "You realize," she said, "that you have just been placed on every watch list that matters." Evan kept walking. His shoes sounded too loud on the polished flooring. "I was already on a few. I'm a liaison. I've offended at least 3 species by accident." "This is not cheese," Mara snapped. Then she softened because anger was easier than fear. "Evan, that was the Night Regent. People do not receive her seal casually." "I didn't ask for it," Evan said. "No," Mara replied. "You didn't. That is what terrifies me." They reached a junction, where the corridor opened into a viewing gallery. Evan stopped near the glass. Beyond it, Halcyon Spire's outer ring drifted with slow station rotation, lights moving like a patient constellation. Mara's reflection hovered beside his, tense and pale. "You're going to go," she said. Evan did not answer immediately. He watched a service drone glide past, silent and indifferent. He wished he felt like that drone. "I don't know," he said finally. Mara made a sound that was half laugh, half disbelief. "You do know. Evan, she just declared you a protected variable, under her seal. Do you know what that means in practice?" "It means she can keep me alive," Evan said. "And it means she can keep you close," Mara added. "And it means everyone will assume Earth is suddenly aligned with the Noctari courts, whether we are or not." Evan turned his head slightly. "Is Earth in danger if I go?" Mara hesitated. "Earth is in danger if you don't. Either way, the narrative is already moving. If you refuse, it's an insult. If you accept, it's a message. And if you accept without preparation, it's a message we didn't write." Evan rubbed his jaw. "So you want me prepared?" "I want you alive," Mara said, then looked away as if admitting it was embarrassing. Evan could not blame her. He suddenly wanted the same thing. "What do we know about her?" he asked. Mara's expression tightened. "Enough to be afraid, not enough to be smart. The Noctari courts are old. They were sovereign when half the current polities were still figuring out fire. They're called Nightborn in a dozen languages for a reason. They do not eat like we do. They do not negotiate like we do. And the Regent Sarilith does not tolerate games. Evan remembered her voice, the stillness, the way the room obeyed without being told. She didn't feel like a monster, he said quietly. Mara looked at him as if he had just confessed to petting a predator. Monsters don't usually. Evan exhaled. Okay, walk me through what happens tomorrow. Mara straightened, grateful for something practical. We start by getting you security clearance for her sector. We request a neutral observer. We print formal statements that say you are attending as a cultural representative, not as an emissary empowered to negotiate. And we hope everyone believes it, Evan said. We hope everyone believes it long enough for you to leave the room in one piece, Mara replied. And Evan, there is one thing you do not do. Evan glanced at her. What? You do not improvise, Mara said. Evan gave her a tired look. That's unfortunate. Improvisation is my primary skill. Mara's mouth twitched despite herself. Then restrain it. You walked into a sovereign's orbit by accident. Do not assume you can walk out the same way. Evan nodded once. Fine. Mara studied him. You're actually going to go. Evan stared through the glass at the slow movement of lights. She gave me something tonight, he said. Not power. Not favor. A moment where she was normal. Mara's eyes narrowed. And you think she wants that again? I think, Evan said carefully, she wants someone who doesn't approach her like a petition. Mara said nothing for a long beat. Then, that is how people become valuable to predators. Evan looked at her, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. Or to lonely rulers. Mara sighed. You're impossible. You've known me 18 months, Evan replied. That's on you. She shook her head, then pulled out her tablet. Come on, we're going to brief you tonight, and I'm going to show you every protocol file we have. If you make a mistake in that chamber, it won't be a social embarrassment. It will be a historical event. They moved again, deeper into the administrative wing. The station's atmosphere changed subtly here. Fewer lanterns, more security nodes. The corridors were lined with quiet doors and silent sensors. Evan's quarters were functional, carefully neutral, designed not to offend anyone. Mara came in like a storm and immediately began projecting files into the air. Holographic text scrolled, symbols, titles, the seal of the Noctari courts, an angular crest that looked like a crown made from shadows. Mara pointed to it. This is what she placed you under. Evan stared at it. It looks like a warning. It is, Mara said. To everyone except you. Evan sank into the chair. Talk to me about the audience chamber. Mara's eyes flicked over her notes. It's in her secured sector. The Noctari delegation has effectively carved out a sovereign enclave aboard Halcyon Spire. Environmental conditions tuned to their preference. Light levels reduced. Security forces independent from station authority. If something goes wrong, station security will not be able to intervene quickly. Evan felt his stomach tighten. So I'll be in her territory. Yes, Mara said, and that matters. Evan let the silence stretch. What do they call her besides Night Regent? Mara hesitated again. That hesitation was becoming a pattern. Some call her the Lantern Eater, she said quietly. Because in old treaties they wrote that she could walk into a room and make hope dim. It's metaphor, mostly. Evan swallowed, mostly. Mara met his gaze. Do you understand now why this is dangerous? Evan thought of Sarilith's eyes. Not cruel, not hungry, just aware. I understand, he said, and I'm going anyway. Mara shut her eyes for a second, then opened them with renewed resolve. Fine, then we do this properly. She moved through the files, selecting key pages, simplifying them into what Evan could actually remember. Rule 1, Mara said. You do not offer your hand unless she offers hers first. Evan winced. Already broke that. Tonight was not tomorrow, Mara said sharply. Tonight was something she allowed. Tomorrow is a chamber. Tomorrow has witnesses. Tomorrow has consequences. Evan nodded. Rule 2, Mara continued. You do not compliment her appearance. Not her eyes, not her crown, not her anything. Compliments can be interpreted as claims. Evan made a face. Claims. Possession, Mara said. Entitlement, challenge, depends on the court. Evan leaned back. So what do I say? Mara pointed to a line of text. You acknowledge her hospitality. You thank her for the invitation. You state you come with respect and without agenda. Evan read it. The wording was formal, clean, safe. It tasted like that pale blue drink. Mara looked up. And Evan. Yeah. If she asks you why you approached her tonight, Mara said, you tell the truth, but you tell it carefully. Evan's lips tightened. Carefully, right. Mara softened just slightly. Because that truth is the only reason you're still breathing. Evan looked down at the crest floating in the air. The Night Regent's seal, sharp and absolute. Somewhere behind his ribs, fear was building into something else. Anticipation, maybe. Or the dumb human instinct to step closer to the edge when someone tells you it's lethal. He lifted his gaze to Mara. What's the worst case? Mara did not answer right away. Then she said, worst case, she uses you as a symbol. She binds Earth to her court without asking Earth's permission, and every other power responds. Evan's mouth went dry, and best case. Mara hesitated, and the hesitation finally cracked into something more honest. Best case, she said quietly, she really is what she looked like tonight. Someone who wanted to dance, and you remind her what it feels like to be seen. Evan stared at the crest again. Best case sounded dangerous too. He looked up. Then we aim for best case, he said. Mara snorted. You always do. She gathered the briefing notes into a tight packet and sent them to his console. Sleep, if you can. Tomorrow you walk into the darkest room on this station, and try not to become a footnote. Evan managed a thin smile. I've always wanted to be remembered. Mara paused at the door, glanced back, and her voice turned serious again. Evan, she said, if at any point you feel like you're losing control of the conversation, you use the phrase I'm about to give you. It will trigger our extraction protocol. Evan nodded. What phrase? Mara's expression was grim. Tell her you require station-neutral air. It's an insult in their language, but it's mild enough to be survivable, and it's the only guaranteed way to get you out. Evan blinked. You're teaching me an insult as a safety word. Yes, Mara said. Welcome to diplomacy. She left. The door sealed with a soft hiss. Evan sat alone, the crest of the Noctari courts hovering above his desk like a shadow made into law. He tried to imagine tomorrow. The chamber. The darkness. Seralith on a throne that didn't need to be a throne to feel like one. He tried to imagine himself speaking the safe words, stepping back, returning to normal. And he realized, with a faint chill, that some part of him did not want normal anymore. He wanted to know what Seralith would look like when no one was watching her for leverage. He wanted to know what she would say when she didn't have to perform sovereignty. He wanted to know if the loneliness he had seen was real. Outside his window, the station lights drifted in patient circles. Somewhere in the Noctari enclave, a sovereign waited in darkness. And Evan Mercer, Earth liaison and professional maker of bad decisions, had already started walking toward her long before morning arrived. The next day arrived without ceremony, as if the station itself wanted to pretend nothing had happened. Evan's wrist console chimed precisely at 900 station time. The notification was not routed through Earth's office, not flagged through Halcyon Spire administration. It arrived under a seal that overrode local etiquette with quiet finality. NOCTARICOURTS. Audience granted. Below it, a time. A location. A corridor designation Evan had never been authorized to enter. Mara met him outside the embassy suite with 2 guards and an expression that suggested she had not slept. She wore a dark blazer, her hair pulled tight, her posture the rigid calm of someone walking into danger because the alternative was worse. You have the statement, she asked. Evan patted the slim data slate in his inner pocket. Yes. You memorized it. Mostly, Evan said. I also memorized your insult safety word, which feels like a personal milestone. Mara did not smile. If you need to use it, you use it without hesitation. Evan nodded once. His stomach was a tight knot. His mind kept trying to turn the day into comedy because comedy made fear manageable. It wasn't working. They moved through security checkpoints that opened for Mara's credentials and then opened again when Evan's console flashed the Noctari seal. The second opening felt different, less like permission, more like recognition. The corridor leading into the Noctari enclave was dimmer by design. The light strips along the floor were softened, colored toward deep amber. The air cooled, drier, carrying a faint mineral scent that reminded Evan of old stone after rain. The station's hum faded as if the enclave's walls swallowed it. At the threshold, a guard in black formal armor, not a uniform, not quite clothing, stood with hands folded. His eyes were dark and unreadable. "Only he enters," the guard said, voice filtered through a translator that sounded slightly delayed. Mara's hand tightened on Evan's sleeve. "Regent granted audience to Earth's liaison. I attend as." "Only he enters," the guard repeated with the patience of someone stating a law. Evan felt Mara's anger rise quick and sharp. He also saw the danger in pushing. He turned his head slightly. "Mara." Her eyes flashed. "Evan, this is exactly what I warned." "I know," he said quietly. "If I don't go in, it's an insult." Mara's jaw clenched. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. "If you go in alone, you are at their mercy." But Evan met her gaze. "I was at their mercy the moment she said yes." Mara looked like she might argue again. Then she did something Evan had not expected. She stepped closer and adjusted his collar with brisk, practical hands, as if tidying him could keep him alive. "Remember," she murmured, "no compliments, no improvisation, thank her hospitality, no physical contact unless she initiates." Evan swallowed. "I remember." Mara's eyes held his. In them he saw fear she refused to admit. "If it goes wrong," she said, "you use the phrase, you do not try to be noble." Evan managed a thin smile. "Nobility is out of my budget." Mara did not smile back. She released his collar and stepped away, forced by the guard's presence. Evan crossed the threshold alone. The door sealed behind him with a sound that was softer than an airlock and somehow more final. The corridor beyond was darker, lit only by low wall panels that threw long shadows. The architecture changed subtly. Halcyon Spire was all clean lines and transparent surfaces. The Noctari enclave was matte and deep, with textured walls that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. As Evan walked, he became aware of the quiet. Not empty quiet, controlled quiet. The kind of silence you heard in museums and courtrooms and places where voices were measured because consequences were heavy. At the end of the corridor, 2 doors stood open. Beyond them, the audience chamber. It was larger than Evan expected, but not grand in the human sense. There were no banners, no obvious displays of wealth. The room felt carved rather than built, its surfaces dark and smooth, its ceiling high enough to swallow sound. Light came from a single source, a suspended ring of amber glow, hovering above the center of the chamber like a restrained sun. And beneath that ring, on a raised platform that did not need to be called a throne to function as one, sat Seralith. She wore black formal garments that flowed like liquid shadow, threaded with thin lines of gold that caught the light only when she moved. Her circlet was the same as the night before, but here it looked less like jewelry and more like a crown that had never asked permission to exist. Her hair fell in long braids. Her posture was still. Her eyes found Evan the moment he stepped into the room. The amber was brighter here. Evan stopped at what felt like the correct distance. Mara's briefing flashed in his mind. Bow angle, address form, do not hesitate. He bowed, not deep, not shallow, a measured inclination of respect. "Night Regent Seralith," he said, voice steady. "Thank you for granting me audience and for your hospitality aboard Halcyon Spire." The translator in the room did something strange. It did not merely convert his words. It layered them with a faint undertone, as if the chamber itself listened and decided how to interpret him. Sarilith watched him for a long beat. Then she spoke, "Evan Mercer of Earth." Hearing his name in her voice made his skin tighten. She said it with perfect clarity, as if she had practiced the syllables. "You came," she continued. "Yes," Evan replied. "I believed it would be disrespectful not to." Her gaze narrowed slightly. "That is the official answer." Evan's mouth went dry. "Yes." Sarilith leaned forward a fraction. The light touched her cheekbones, her lips, the faint sharpness of her ears. In that moment she looked both impossibly elegant and faintly dangerous, like a blade polished to beauty. "Give me the real answer," she said. Evan hesitated. Mara had said to be careful. The statement was in his pocket, ready, safe. He could recite it and leave with his life intact. But Sarilith's gaze did not feel like a trap. It felt like a test. And if he failed it, it would not be because he said the wrong words. It would be because he did not say any true ones at all. Evan inhaled once. "I came," he said quietly, "because last night you looked like someone trapped behind your own title, and I don't know how to pretend I didn't see it." The chamber went even quieter, as if the walls leaned closer to listen. Sarilith's expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted, not softer exactly, more awake. "Do you understand?" she asked. "What you became the moment you touched my hand in that atrium?" Evan's throat tightened. "A headline." Sarilith's mouth curved faintly. "A symbol." Evan did not flinch. "I didn't want to be." "Of course you did not," Sarilith said almost gently. "That is why you are interesting." She rose from the platform in one smooth motion. No dramatic flourish, no courtly delay. She simply stood, and the chamber reoriented around her presence. She descended the steps without sound and crossed the floor toward Evan. As she approached, Evan became aware of details he had missed the night before. The absence of unnecessary movement, the way her breath was slow, controlled, the way the air felt cooler in her wake. She stopped an arm's length away. Evan held still. He did not step back. He did not step forward. He did not reach. Sarilith studied him for a long moment. Then she lifted her hand. Evan's pulse jumped. He remembered Mara's rule: do not initiate contact. Sarilith's fingers touched his wrist, right where his console rested. Cool skin against warm. The sensation was ordinary. The meaning was not. A faint shimmer spread from her fingertips, and Evan felt his console vibrate once, as if acknowledging a new authority. Sarilith withdrew her hand. "You are under my seal," she said. "Not as property, not as captive, as a protected voice." Evan swallowed. "A protected voice." "Yes," she said. "In my court, that is rarer than protection of body." Evan's mind raced. He understood enough to know what she was doing. She was placing him within her narrative, but there was something else beneath it, something more personal. Sarilith turned slightly, and the suspended ring of amber light shifted, casting a different angle across her face. For a brief second, the regent looked less like a sovereign and more like a woman standing in a room she had built to keep the world at a distance. "You called me by my title," she said. "That seemed wise," Evan replied. "It was correct," Sarilith said. "But last night you called me by my name." Evan's throat tightened. Sarilith. The way her eyes reacted to hearing it here in this chamber was small and unmistakable. It was not hunger, not pleasure, something closer to relief. "You did not say it like a petition," she said quietly. "You said it like a person." Evan's voice came out rougher than he intended. "Because you are one." The amber light above them hummed faintly, as if approving or warning. Sarilith stepped closer, not close enough to touch again, but close enough that Evan could feel the coolness of her presence. "Earth's liaison," she said, and there was the faintest trace of humor in it. "Do you know what your colleagues are saying outside this chamber?" Evan managed a dry breath that might have been a laugh. "That I'm dead." Sarilith's mouth curved slightly. "They are saying you have been claimed." Evan's pulse hit hard once. "I haven't." Sarilith's gaze held his. "I know." A beat of silence. Then she added softer, "But the galaxy does not care what is true. It cares what can be believed. Evan stared at her, understanding settling like weight in his chest. She was offering him protection, and she was also offering him a role, a symbol she could use to move pieces across a board older than his species. Evan's mouth went dry. "What do you want from me?" Sarilith did not look away. "I want," she said carefully, "one thing that cannot be negotiated, one thing that cannot be bought." Evan's hands curled slightly at his sides. "Which is?" Sarilith's eyes softened by a fraction. "Honesty," she said, "in this chamber and in the public spaces where everyone lies." Evan exhaled slowly. "That's a dangerous request." "Yes," Sarilith agreed. "That is why I ask you." Evan held her gaze. "And if I refuse?" Sarilith's expression did not harden. It simply became more distant, as if the chamber itself pulled her back behind the title. "Then you leave," she said, "alive, under my seal. And tonight becomes a rumor that others will shape without you." Evan felt something twist in his chest. He had told himself he came here to survive, to manage the fallout, to keep Earth from being dragged into the Night Regent's orbit. But standing here, he realized survival was not the only thing at stake. If he walked away now, he would never again know whether the loneliness he saw was real, or whether it was simply another mask worn by power. Sarilith watched him decide. She did not rush him. She did not pressure him. She simply waited, patient as stone. Evan drew in a breath. "I can be honest," he said, "but I won't be used to threaten Earth." Sarilith's eyes sharpened, not in anger but in appraisal. "You would set terms." "I would set boundaries," Evan corrected. "There's a difference." For the first time, Sarilith smiled in a way that looked genuinely pleased. "Good," she said softly. "Then you are not only sincere, you are difficult." Evan's lips tightened. "I've been called worse." "I have no doubt," Sarilith replied. She stepped back, and the chamber's tension eased by a fraction, as if her proximity had been its own kind of pressure. "Come," Sarilith said. "There is something you must see before you leave my enclave." Evan hesitated. "What?" Sarilith turned toward a side passage, her dark garments moving like shadow in water. "The part of this station," she said, "where the light does not reach." Evan's pulse quickened. This felt like the moment in a story where the main character should refuse. Instead, he followed her into the dim corridor, deeper into Noctari territory, knowing that every step forward made it harder to claim he was still just a man who had asked a lonely woman to dance. The corridor narrowed as Sarilith led Evan away from the audience chamber. The amber floor lights thinned to faint lines, and the air grew cooler, drier, quieter. A door opened without touch. Inside was not a prison but a gallery. Rows of lanterns hung from dark beams, hundreds of them, each holding a different kind of dim light. Some burned warm, some glowed cold. A few were almost dark, with only an ember shifting inside. Evan slowed. "What is this?" "The lantern vault," Sarilith said. "A record of promises." He stepped closer to the nearest row. Each lantern carried a small etched tag. "Treaties." "Oaths," she said. "Safe passage, debts repaid, words that survived in public." "And the dark ones?" "Promises that failed." Evan swallowed and forced out what he needed to know. "They said I was claimed." Sarilith's pace slowed. "They would say it no matter what I did." "That's not an answer." She turned to him. In the vault's dim light, her amber eyes were the brightest thing in the room. In the Noctari courts, a public dance can be read as a vow of shelter, a sovereign's shadow placed over the invited. Her voice stayed calm. A story others repeat until it becomes law. Evan's pulse tightened. "So you knew." "Yes, and you let it happen. I chose not to correct it." Evan held her gaze. "Why?" Sarilith reached up and steadied one lantern so it stopped swaying. "Because I am tired of every approach being a request, every kindness being bait, every word being measured for what it can extract." Evan exhaled slow. "You thought I wasn't bait. I watched you," she said. "You avoided power. You made yourself small so you would not be used as a piece." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Then you walked toward me anyway." Evan gave a dry breath. Bad decisions are my specialty. You looked at me like a person, Saralith said, not like a sovereign. The sentence landed with a strange intimacy. Evan could picture her in the ballroom again, still as a statue, wearing loneliness like formal dress. I meant what I said, he replied. I won't be used to threaten Earth, and I won't be owned. Saralith studied him for a long moment. Then she lifted her hands to the circlet on her brow and removed it. She set it on a narrow pedestal beside an unlit lantern. Without the crown, she did not look weak. She looked less defended. I do not want an own voice, she said quietly. Own voices lie. I want one that can tell me the truth and still remain in the room. Evan's throat tightened. Then what do we do about the story they're telling? They will demand a meaning, Saralith said. So we give them one that does not chain you. She walked 2 steps deeper into the vault and stopped before a lantern that was nearly dead. Its tag had been scratched so many times the symbols were scarred, as if someone had tried to erase a name and failed. Saralith did not touch it. She simply looked at it, and for the first time since Evan had met her, something like old grief flickered across her face. This, she said, voice flat with control, was a vow made by a sovereign who confused protection with possession. It ended in blood, and everyone called it tradition until the bodies forced them to stop. Evan felt his stomach tighten. Is that why they fear your touch? Saralith's eyes returned to him. It is why I do not offer it lightly. Evan took a careful breath. Then let's not repeat that story. She waited silent, letting him choose his words. Evan said the plan as simply as he could. Ask me to dance tonight, publicly. It changes the shape of it. It becomes mutual, not ownership. If anyone wants a meaning, we give them one they can't twist into a chain. For the first time, Saralith looked surprised. Then slowly she nodded. Tonight, she said, I will ask. Evan let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. The danger was still there, but the choice was no longer one-sided. Saralith lifted the circlet again, held it for a heartbeat as if it weighed more than gold, then placed it back on her head. The regent returned not as a mask, but as a role she could wear. At the enclave threshold she paused. One more thing. Evan turned. When I ask you, she said, voice low, do not look away. He met her eyes. I won't. A faint softness touched her mouth, almost a smile, almost a relief. Then the door sealed between them, and Evan stepped back into Halcyon Spire's brighter air. Mara was waiting exactly where he had left her, pale and furious with relief. You're alive, she said. Barely, Evan replied. Before she could demand details, his wrist console vibrated. A new seal flashed across the screen. Meridian Council emergency session. Mandatory attendance. Immediate. Mara read it and went still. That fast. Evan looked back toward the dim corridor that led into Noctari territory, toward the vault of promises, and the woman who had chosen honesty over protocol. Tonight she would ask him to dance, and the rest of the galaxy had already arrived for the answer.